it is morning where I am at the moment, so hope you're all doing well. My name is Damien, the tall, friendly atheist dad, host of the Tall Friendly Atheist Dad podcast, and creator for the Tall Friendly Atheist Dad YouTube channel. And this, don't know if you've seen this video do the rounds. This is Redeem Zoomer with their video, All Atheist Arguments Answered in 10 Minutes. The first thing I've got to say, it's not all atheist arguments. It's I suppose, a specific curation of simplified arguments that atheists make. And given how can I say, given some of his responses, I think that this guy, it is quite possible that this guy thinks that this is everything that atheists have thought of. You know, they're way, I said, this is not the entire gamut of atheist arguments. It's a small selection, and some of them can be representative of atheist arguments. But this is not the entire. So when he says all, and it's got all in capital letters, as you can see down the bottom, it is definitely not it is definitely not the entirety or the corpus of anti-Christian belief. And even like some of these arguments I don't use myself. It's like and probably never really thought of. So yeah, there is an actual episode with my proper thoughts on there. If you want to listen, Tall Friendly Atheist podcast, you check it out. Otherwise, I will play. And so it's even infected my YouTube channel. So thanks, guys. Anyway, so let's go. Let's see who's got to say.
Atheists have a lot of arguments, but they never really think of anything new that the church hasn't had answers to for the past 2,000 years.
So even his first line there, atheists haven't really thought of anything new. That is entirely wrong. And the field, like, firstly, I suppose the biggest thing is that the field of the natural sciences has given us a lot of understanding about the world around us, and has shown that, you know, what we hundreds of years ago thought was caused by God or by mechanisms in the supernatural world has turned out to be natural mechanisms all along. The earthquakes, you know, the moon, the orbit of the moon and the sun, you know, mental illness, viruses, volcanoes. You know, it's a, you know, and like, yeah, so there's a lot of new arguments coming from the field of the sciences that show that what was attributed to God, you know, was, you know, it turns out it wasn't. And even then, the fields of philosophy and like the philosophy of morality and the philosophy of religion, you know, there's a lot of arguments coming from there that show that, you know, God is, the best thing you can say about God is that he's more of a placeholder. He's like a mystery bucket that you reach to when you need an answer for something that, you know. So I can see this guy's trying to be sarcastic, and look, if he wants to be sarcastic, I'm happy to be sarcastic back. But yeah, you can see. This looking at his wheel here. So he's got yes, his stupid little wheel here. I believe in science, so that means God can't be real. Well, not necessarily. You can be a Christian and believe, you know, accept, I suppose, most of science. And to prove this point, I know a guy who is actually, I know a couple of people who are engineers and even have their own engineering consulting firms who are 6-day creationists. So what the heck? To the right of that, there's got, I was raised Christian and I have trauma. They said not to sin. No, the trauma doesn't come from being told not to sin. The trauma comes from being gaslit. You know, the trauma comes from, you know, being constantly judged, and from, you know, being told that you're essentially worthless. You know, and just some of the stuff that churches do to control people. And look, I spent years in a fundamentalist cult, so I know what that's about. Look, here is a violent Bible verse that nobody ever noticed before. Well, no, that's the fact that, you know, A violent Bible verse doesn't necessarily disprove God, but it goes against the idea of a good God. There is contradictions in the Bible that the church has never noticed. Well, if the church notices a contradiction and still believes in the divine inerrancy of the Bible, then that just shows the power of the power of the faith. Sky Daddy, well, yeah, that's not really, yeah, not an argument I would make. It's if God is real, why don't I have a girlfriend yet? Well, because I have a wife. I don't need a God to know murder is bad. Don't ask about abortion though. I don't consider abortion to be murder. Well, actually, no. I don't consider abortion up to like 24 weeks to be murder. That's my nuanced take on it. Your God did a genocide in the flood, he big meanie. Well, yes, that's not really an argument against the existence of God. That's more again against a God that is all good and all loving. Sorry, I just gone off on a 5-minute tangent there without issue.
So let's answer them. Religion causes wars. Well, actually, only 7% of all human wars were caused by religion, and if you remove Islamic wars, that number drops down to 3%.
Okay, so he quotes the Encyclopedia of Wars, which I've never read, and I don't know if it seems legit. Yeah. Now, the question I would have here is, how do you differentiate between a war caused by religion and a war in which religion is the vehicle? So, for example, the Troubles in Northern Ireland. We all know that Northern Ireland was split. There was a big schism in Northern Ireland along Protestant and Catholic lines. However, we know that wasn't like we know that war was about self-governance as opposed to the correct interpretation of Scripture. So, and even for example, and also as another example, the current Israel-Palestine conflict. Religion is being heavily invoked, but that war is about self-determination. Yeah, and lots of wars are mostly about self-determination. Yeah, so, and even if 7% of wars are due to religion, religion does cause wars. It is not a major factor. But what I would probably say is that religion doesn't prevent wars. I'll say that. So yeah, so let's assume that 7% of let's assume that the Encyclopedia of Wars is legit and correct. Religion causes wars. Okay, 7% of wars caused by religion, but I would say that religion doesn't stop wars, and at no stage has God come down and said, "Guys, stop fighting. Go to your corners. I'll talk to you separately, and you can shake hands afterwards." God has never done that.
A lot of evil has been done in the name of religion. This is true, but the most murderous people in human history have been atheists. This doesn't mean religion is true, it just means you can't use that as an argument against it.
Okay, so he's played I'm going to say the royal flush, what he thinks is the royal flush of Hitler, Stalin, Pol Pot, and Mao Zedong. There's a few others. There's Idi Amin as well. You could probably say about that. And just trying to think who else is there's Hirohito. There's heaps of people who've done. The 20th century is quite a murderous period. But yes, so there is evidence to the contrary that these people were atheists. Hitler, I would say, I don't think Hitler was an atheist. I think he was anti-religion, but I think for all intents and purposes, especially if you read Mein Kampf, and the fact that, yeah, Stalin, there's some evidence that he actually became a proper Christian, sometime later in his life. Pol Pot and Mao Zedong, yeah, I'm not too sure exactly on their religious beliefs, but yeah. However, okay, let's grant that the Hitler, Pol Pot, Stalin, Mao Zedong were all atheists. That doesn't excuse what happened in all the centuries up to the 20th century, when the church ruled, lots of time, when the church ruled the world for a long period of time, there are atrocities committed there, and it doesn't doesn't negate the atrocities committed now. Look at the Catholic Church sex abuse. Well, not just the Catholic Church, but like the sex abuse scandals in like almost every church denomination. The purity culture. That's borderline evil in itself. And yeah, so saying most murderous people in history were non-religious. Most murderous people in history were not figure skaters or stamp collectors. That's yeah. Now, correlation doesn't equal causation, and it's something that Redeem Zoom is going to say a bit later on. So, but here he breaks his own rule. Atheism caused the people to be murderous. Yeah, so people do and have done evil in the name of religion. And I think it just goes to show that like people in general, when power is unchecked, that it's ripe for human rights abuses. What you could probably say though is that democracy is one of the best ways to prevent mass murder. Because if you look at political history, when a government has been kept in check by the people, then yeah, that's when atrocities haven't happened. You know what I mean?
If you were born somewhere,
I should just say, and also, it's also not so much an argument against. Like I say, it's not an argument against the existence of God. It's probably an argument against the idea that religion benefits society. But yeah, it's a bit of a tough one. But anyway, let's go back to
somewhere else, you wouldn't be a religion is true. It just means you can't use that as an argument against it. If you were born somewhere else, you wouldn't be a Christian. Okay, and if you were born somewhere else, you wouldn't be an atheist. Everyone's beliefs are shaped by their context.
Okay, he is actually correct in that people's beliefs are shaped by their context. However, I would like to know where you're more likely to be an atheist, because America is like ostensibly one of the most religious Western country. Let me just go back to here. Go back to I think here. Yeah, so he's got like Americas and yeah. Yeah, like North and South and Central Americas as Christian, and Europe is Christian. But then I think it's trying to be Spain, or is that meant to be Turkey or Africa or something? It's more likely to be Muslim. Yeah. Then he goes, you're more likely to be an atheist. Yeah. Here, let me play that.
Everyone's beliefs are shaped by their context.
True. Now, as I said, America is the most religious, like most Protestant country. Actually, like very heavily religious. Russia is very heavily religious. Are you more likely to be an atheist in America or Russia or where? But I think this is more a case of the argument against the idea that 200 million people can't be wrong. So, and also how because I do come across a lot of people who grew up as Christian and they never really challenged their beliefs. And so, yeah, it is kind of right. And that if you lived elsewhere, you wouldn't be Christian. But where he says,
okay, and if you were born somewhere else, you wouldn't be an atheist.
Which is interesting because I grew up in a city whose nickname is the City of Churches. So take that for what you will. And yeah, I literally had a church right across my backyard when I was growing up. And then, I spent years in a fundamentalist cult, and then I eventually drifted into a Baptist church, and then I became an atheist. So it's like, well, I'm not an atheist because of the culture around me, because I spent a good, 15, 20 years as a Christian. So, it's I think this is more an argument against accepting religious belief because your peers accept that same religious belief.
Everyone's beliefs are shaped by their context. How do you know which religion is true? Well, everyone, religious or not, has faith in a certain worldview. It's just that some worldviews are called religions and some are secular.
Okay, so a bit of dodgy wordplay going on for this one. Yeah. Firstly, a religion is not just a worldview. It's actually the acceptance of a set of axioms and dogmas and prescribed religious texts and prescribed activities, and depending on if you accept if your religion is supernatural as well, then you also incorporate ideas about the supernatural. But trying to reduce religion to trying to equivocate worldview with religion is a big is. I can see this guy hasn't passed. Okay, if he has passed a philosophy class, it was probably Ravi Zacharias' philosophy class, in which case it doesn't count. Or Cy Ten Bruggencate, probably his philosophy class. That's so on the screen here, he's got, humanism and Epicureanism and existentialism, nihilism as worldviews, and then he's got the others as religions. How do you know which worldview is true? Well, the thing is, though, that do people accept worldviews or religions, or it's an interesting.
But everyone has to ask the question of which worldview best explains the world.
To a point, yes. I suppose you don't have to. It's like, it's more how you see the world is kind of your own personal philosophy. And so for me, so like just to answer that question, for me, the best explanation of the world around us comes from the study of the material sciences, which either makes very little or zero accommodation for the supernatural. I find the supernatural is just what the natural can't explain until it is explained. It's but yeah, so for example, you could be a humanist Christian, you could be an existentialist pagan. There's nothing saying you can't have one of these worldviews and also believe in one of these religions. You could be a nihilist Christian. You could be a humanist Jew. You could be an existentialist Buddhist. It's so this is kind of why I title this like Atrocious Apologetics, is because the slippery word play and the equivocation fallacy, and I will get to an equivocation fallacy a bit later on. But it's sneaky.
There's no scientific proof that God exists. Well, by definition, science can only prove things inside the natural world, and by definition, God is something outside the natural world. So science can neither prove nor disprove God.
Okay, let's just go back to here. This is another slippery argument, because what you're essentially saying is that God, well, firstly, the idea that God exists outside of the natural world is an assumption, not anything that has been substantially proved. So I find that a bit of a again, atrocious apologetics, because if you assume the thing that you want to be true, hey, guess what? It's true. He's right in that science deals with the physical, but like everything that we've got, like the fact I'm using a computer to present this is because of our understanding of the physical. But probably my biggest counter to this is that the Bible and like every Christian believer will say, well, that God has no problem interacting with the natural world. So if God does that, then there should be a way of being able to determine, if something was caused by God and how you prove that. So one of my challenges when someone says, oh, I prayed and this happened, how do you differentiate between God doing something and something happening for reasons you don't understand? For example, when someone is cured of cancer, how do you know that it wasn't your immune system finally kicking in? How do you know it wasn't the treatment finally working? How do you know it wasn't an incorrect reading of the scans? You've got to you've got to, I suppose, be a bit more like if you're going to credit the most awesome being in history with, with this, you need a bit more than I believe it's true because I believe it. Yeah. But yeah, I suppose like when Jesus appears on a piece of toast, that is as apparently the supernatural interacting with the natural. So there has to be a way of proving that God did something to cause his son to appear on a piece of toast.
Can neither prove nor disprove medically documented
I'll
cases of
just go
people
back
with demonic
to
possession
here.
speak God. There's no evidence of anything supernatural. Well, that's just not accurate. There are medically documented cases of people with demonic possession speaking in languages they don't know, for example, and people with near-death experiences getting information they never had access to.
Okay, so this wouldn't necessarily prove the supernatural because people speaking in languages they don't know or getting accurate information that they've had access to. Now, when he says medically documented, yeah, I'd have to read up a bit on that. And look, there are certainly things that we can't explain. Yeah, I will concede that. We don't know everything, and there could be but to say this weird thing happened, therefore it was supernatural. That is essentially supernaturalism of the gaps. And demonic foes. Richard Gallagher. I don't know anything about him. I don't know if this book is. However, as I say, has anything in this book been critically analyzed and reviewed to, in the same way that other scientific publications would? See, if this is just his, if demonic foes is just his thoughts on things, okay, that's fine. He can have his thoughts. But if he's presenting this as a counter to the natural sciences, then he should submit this to peer review and have it critically examined and analyzed to make sure that everything stacks up. And I suppose my other counterpoint is that let's say I wrote a book saying that Richard Gallagher is completely incorrect in everything he says. How would we prove whose book is right, mine or his? Yeah, that's the that's the way. Yeah, another way of looking at it as well is that like we can play books at 20 paces, but we have to have a way of determining who is right. And look, I just slightly on this topic. Last year, I finally read. What was that? What was that book? Oh, Rebecca Brown. Geez, I'm gonna go down a rabbit hole here. Rebecca Brown. Oh, he came to set the captives free. That's right. So Rebecca Brown was apparently a doctor as well. But and on the face of it, her book's titled Rebecca Brown, MD, just like Richard Gallagher, MD. But if you look at the story of Rebecca Brown, there's a lot that doesn't make sense, and it is possible this guy as well. It's possible this guy has gone, oh look, this guy's a doctor, and I've read the cover. The cover says my 25 years as a psychiatrist. Therefore, up yours, atheists. As could well be. And look, I was like that when I was a Christian as well. If someone said there's no evidence anything supernatural to me, I would have got this book and like chucked it at the atheist and going, look, yeah. So I'm glad I'm kind of out of the brainwashing.
The Bible has contradictions. Okay, you think you found an apparent contradiction that the church hasn't known about for 2,000 years?
Okay, so if the church has known about contradictions for 2,000 years, yet still believes in the divine inerrancy of the scripture, it's no wonder that in this day and age of rational inquiry, that people are leaving the church. It's like you still believe in a book where donkeys speak and snakes speak, and a flood that needs like 3 million times more water than it's on the earth today, and look, contradictions here, but you still believe. Okay, whatever. And look, and some of the church's responses to the contradictions have been frankly woeful. Like, some of the stupid apologetics I've come across to explain stuff, is honestly, just woeful. Yeah.
Every apparent contradiction can be explained by understanding just a little bit of theology.
Okay, so you can. Every contradiction can be explained by just a little bit of theology. Right. So on the screen here, he's got, those shalt give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. Exodus 21, 23, 25. Then the other side, he's got, ye resist not evil, but whoever shall smite thee on the right cheek, turn to him. And he's got, on one side, how law works, how a relationship should work. But that's... Look, I wouldn't necessarily call that a contradiction. I would say, the various narratives of Jesus's betrayal, of his last words, of his resurrection. Who was at the resurrection? How many people? What did he say? What were Jesus' last words on the cross? And probably the biggest one that I've never had a coherent answer to is the withering of the fig tree in Mark. Jesus goes to Bethany, then on the way to the temple, he stops by him and his disciples stop by the fig tree. Jesus curses the fig tree. They all go to Jesus and the disciples go to the temple, clear the temple, come back, and they find the fig tree has withered. In Matthew, they go to the temple, and then on the way out of the temple, they come to the fig tree. Jesus curses the fig tree, and it withers straight away. So there's a contradiction, right there. And yes, but then in John, Jesus clears the temple, but there's no mention of a fig tree. And in John, Jesus clears the temple at the beginning of his ministry, not at the end. So, there are clear contradictions. I don't know what I don't actually have too much of a problem with it, because I see the Bible as a product of its time. The contradictions become a problem when you take the Bible as the word of God, authored by God himself. Like, Christians, don't be so hung up on it. The Bible's written by men. It's, dude, just like, guys, just chill. Fucking chill.
The Gospels were anonymous. Okay, anonymous doesn't mean we have no idea who wrote them. It just means the names of the authors aren't signed in the text itself.
Well,
but we literally have writings from church fathers who knew the apostles and can verify that they indeed wrote the books named after them.
Okay, so the Gospels are anonymous. Yes, the Gospels were anonymous. And it becomes I suppose it's a problem when, you hang your hat on the belief that the author's names wrote the books. The authors named are not, like I said, the people named on the Gospels are not the authors. They're the source. And if you get into the Greek, the Gospels are, for example, the Gospel of Mark, its Greek is then kata evangelion markion, something like that. So sorry for the butchering the Greek, which means the Gospel according to Mark. It denotes a source, not an author. So John's Gospel would be kata evangelion Ioannon or Ianno. I forget what the Greek for John is, but yeah. So John didn't write John's Gospel. Even in John's Gospel, it says that, it uses the first person plural, which means it wasn't an author. So even in John's Gospel, John didn't write John. It's yeah. So Saint Ignatius, the problem is from my research anyway, we don't have Saint Ignatius's words to say he knew John. We have Jerome, who quoted Polycarp, who says he knew John, who says that So Jerome quoting Polycarp, that Polycarp was a disciple of John, and that he knew Saint Ignatius as well. So quoting Saint Ignatius, I don't know if that's quite correct, but yeah, the Gospels are anonymous. Why they're anonymous, it's weird. However, probably the biggest thing that strikes me is that when the believers are writing to each other, they have no problem. They have no problem putting their name on their work. Paul puts his name on his writings. Peter, John, but when they're talking, when they're giving a biographical account of the most awesome man in history, then we've got to leave our name off. That sounds odd. That sounds odd to me.
The Gospels misquote Jesus. Now, it's true that a lot of secular scholars think the Gospels are a mix of real quotes from the historical Jesus and fake quotes added by the church, but none of them can agree on which quotes are legit and which are not, so we can discard their opinions.
This is again more bad apologetics. It's basically saying, the scholars can't agree, therefore we can disregard their opinion, and no religion can agree on which one is the one true faith. Not even the denominations can agree on which one is the true is the truth. So we can discard their opinions as well. It's just because nobody. Now, I would say the Gospels misquote Jesus because I'm not convinced there was a Jesus to misquote. Because there's various reasons I won't get into right now, but yeah, I'm just not convinced that there was if there was a Jesus, we can know nothing about him. I'll say we can't. I can say we can suspect some things about him, but we can't know anything about him. Which, yeah.
Jesus never claimed to be God. Yes, he did. He didn't say, "I am God, worship me," but he showed that he was God in many places in all four Gospels by doing things that only God can do. It's true that he didn't walk around before his resurrection claiming to be God, because he wanted people to figure it out themselves. That's why he kept saying, "Who do you say that I am?"
In John says, I and the Father are one, and if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So this Redeem Zoomer's thinking of show, not tell, is rendered moot by by John's gospel. And even in even in Mark. In Mark, Jesus is adopted as God's son, so it's a bit weird how So it's only in only in Matthew and Luke where Jesus is born as God's son, whereas in John, Jesus just decides to appear. That's how awesome he is. But yeah, I want to say Jesus never. It's like Jesus never claimed to be God. Well, like I said in John, he does. In John,
before his resurrection claiming to be God, because he wanted people to figure it out themselves. That's why he kept saying, "Who do you say that I am?" However, after his resurrection, people figured out that he was God, and Jesus congratulated them. The later one of the Gospels was written, the more divine it makes Jesus seem, so we can extrapolate that Jesus was originally a human figure who got made more divine over time. Alright, maybe some Gospels emphasize Jesus' divinity more than others, but what about Paul's letters that fully confess the divinity of Jesus and were also written before any of the Gospels? So that breaks your pattern.
Okay, so again, a bit of a sneaky dodge. Because the straw man atheist asks about Gospels, and Redeem Zoomer chucks in Paul's letters, which aren't Gospels, which aren't biographical accounts. It's more opinion. He's dodged that the later Gospels emphasize Jesus' divinity. No, bullcrap. It's they're rewriting, they're basically rewriting the gospel. There is a strong academic case to say that Matthew rewrote Mark, Luke rewrote Matthew, John rewrote Luke. I don't quite accept that, but I think there's a strong case. I think there's a strong case for it. So, and like this dodge that, yeah, emphasizing the divinity. So no, they're actually rewriting. They're making a different character almost. That's you can't get away from that. And this is why it's atrocious apologetics, because it's like it's almost gaslighting. I'd say it's almost gaslighting. And Paul, now the problem with including Paul is that Paul never believed in a Jesus who was on earth. Paul never mentions about disciples, about miracles, about being crucified on a cross. Um, crucified on a cross at the behest of the Jewish leadership. Paul's Jesus was crucified, but in a spiritual realm, and the only time anyone ever saw Jesus was after his death, not during his life. So yeah, it's so this response to the atheist argument fails a couple of ways.
The Bible supports slavery. No, it doesn't. Just because there's slavery in the Bible doesn't mean the Bible supports it.
And Redeem Zoomer is 1,000% wrong. The Bible has verses like passages saying who you can enslave, who you can't, how long to enslave them for, who can and can't go free, and under what circumstances you can get your slaves. So, and this is the Christian response to the Bible supporting slavery is, I think, brainwashing. To be honest, like, and it's interesting how like for example, Redeem Zoom will say, no, the slavery, just because there's slavery in the Bible doesn't mean it was okay. Whereas some Christians will go, look, slavery was important because it gave people a job and skills to use, as when they were released. So which one is it? Was slavery condoned or condemned in the Bible? And like, for example, Deuteronomy 20. God actually commands Joshua that in any towns that Israel comes across, Israel is to make a peace treaty with that town. If the town accepts the treaty, the town is to become Israel's slaves. If not, then Israel is to wipe out all the men and take the women and children as plunder. Go figure out what that means. Why only the women and children? Go figure that out. And also 1 Kings 9:15. It says this is the account of the forced labor that was used to build the temple. So, even God's house, even the temple was built by slaves. So if God had such a problem with slavery, he would have said, no, guys, do it how they're going to do it in a few thousand years time. It's a big dodge, and I do get frustrated with bad apologetics that try to deny the obvious. And this is what I mean by when you've uncritically accepted religious dogma and try base your arguments around that. It's
There are some Old Testament verses that could be interpreted as condoning slavery, but Jesus himself said that the Old Testament made accommodations to people's sinful state.
Okay, so this is what I find common in the slavery argument is that, look, Moses permitted divorce because your hearts were hard. It's like, well, that doesn't. I find that an interesting dodge itself, because God can say, don't murder, don't eat shellfish, don't wear 2 types of clothing, don't work on the Sabbath. But when it comes to slavery, it's kind of because your hearts are hard, I kind of have to let you do this. And it's like, it's God. God can say anything. So I think Matt Dillahunty's responses here, on the money.
And also, slave owners in the American South had slave Bibles for their slaves to read, but it omitted a lot of the real Bible, so if the Bible actually did support slavery, this wouldn't have been necessary.
Now, I don't have a slave Bible, but I can probably tell you, like, just on the face of it, if the Bible didn't support slavery at all, you wouldn't be using the Bible. You would be making your own text for a start. So the fact that a pro-slavery argument can be made from selected verses of your texts is a bad sign about your holy book. And I'm sure all the slaves would have loved to have known about the endless genealogies and who begat who and all that kind of stuff. But so I don't have a slave Bible. I don't know much about the slave Bible, so I'm won't say. But I'm probably going to guess much of the genealogies and all that kind of stuff are removed. But yeah, the question I have is there any New Testament verse that condemns slavery as strongly as any singular Old Testament verse promotes it? I think you'll find the answer is no.
Christianity supported slavery. Well, sure, some Christians did, but all human civilizations have had slavery.
Okay, all human civilizations have slavery. No, that is incorrect. The Incas, for example, didn't have slavery, and the indigenous peoples of Australia didn't have slavery. And I'm sure there's probably some other cultures that didn't have slavery. I will agree that lots of cultures had slavery, and I'm glad we. Well, let's just say we don't have it in the Western world. I'll say that much. But yeah. But I'll let him play his argument out, then I'll respond.
Christian civilization was the first one to abolish it on moral grounds. The fact that you're against slavery is due to Christian influence.
Okay, so let me grant that Christianity ended on moral grounds. Some Christians fought against slavery against other Christians who promoted slavery. So Christians ending slavery on moral grounds by fighting against Christians who were for slavery on moral grounds. So it's a bit of a, so I'll agree that Christians changed it, but it's not like every Christian was on board and every Christian was singing from the same hymn book. So yeah, so it's a bit like, it is a bit of a dodge and a bit of bad apologetics. Like, I would like Christians to say, yes, William Wilberforce was a devout Christian, but he was fighting against other devout Christians. There were plenty of devout Christians who, who were for slavery. So I don't have the figures off the top of my head, but there were like pastors and ministers and priests who were, for example, Josiah Priest actually wrote a book called Biblical Support for Slavery, Biblical Defense of Slavery. So it's, he was arguing on moral grounds as well as some other facets as well, that blacks should be enslaved. So, but look, Christianity has supported slavery. Yes, that is not a, don't be too offended by that. Unfortunately, you can't, how can I say? Yes, like atheists have done bad things, Muslims have done bad things, Christians have done bad things in all throughout history. But your responsibility is, like, you as a Christian aren't responsible for what, other people did. What your job as a Christian is to not repeat those mistakes. Be honest about the past. That's, it's not hard. But I suppose if you're trying to negate the charge that atheists bring by saying that, but I suppose by taking it personally and going, look, no, it wasn't like that. It wasn't like that. When it fucking well was, that's a bit of a problem there. Anyway, let's continue.
Also, most organizations fighting modern day slavery are Christian.
That is incorrect. I'm not saying there aren't, but there are numerous secular organizations. And if you go to endslaverynow.org/connect, you'll get like lists of dozens upon dozens upon dozens of anti-slavery organizations. And not in my research, not one I found was Christian.
God killed tons of people in the Bible.
Yes.
Well, it's actually way more than that. God numbers everyone's days. He's the giver of life, so he can take it, especially if people sin.
Okay, so what you're saying is that, yes, your God is a mass murderer, but you don't care. That's essentially what you're saying. And look, I've come across this apologetic numerous times where, God numbers everyone's days. So in that case, the children getting cancer, is that God, that is then God taking, or someone dying in a car crash, that is God taking life. It's a stupid apologetic, because how do you know that how do you know that someone died because God willed them to die, or as opposed to them dying for natural reasons or even unnatural reasons? You know, it's yeah, it's yeah, it's an atrocious apologetic. I'll say that much. And yeah, it kind of shows that yeah, like yes, God killed people because he can. Okay, so now we agree that God is a mass murderer. You know, I will not follow the religion in which God is a mass murderer. And it's interesting that you know he in a previous point he said, "Oh, you know, the most murderous people were atheists," and then it's like, "Well, yeah, my God killed tons of people as well," you know. So really, he should be saying that atheists are doing what my God did. That's what he should be saying.
So last semester, I actually scored 95 for one of my essays.
Atheist countries are more prosperous. Yes, it's true that Northern European countries are very prosperous and very secular, but correlation doesn't equal causation.
Okay, correlation doesn't equal causation. This is a maxim that he has violated, you know, numerous times throughout this video. It's interesting that he also mentions Northern European countries as well. Say Australia, New Zealand, America, Canada, you know, South Africa. Actually, South Africa prosperous. It's possibly. Even some of the southern European countries are prosperous as well, just not Greece. But yeah, it's correlation doesn't equal causation. It's like, well, yeah.
It's not like atheism causes prosperity, it's that prosperity causes atheism.
Okay, so correlation doesn't equal causation, except when I say it does.
Because when people have comfortable lives, they don't feel a need to depend on God.
Well, it's hard to say because you look at America. America is ostensibly a secular, well, politically secular, but you know it is the most Christian nation on earth to the point that Christianity is a business. So you know, it's yeah. I wouldn't say prosperity causes atheism. Understanding, like being free to inquire, leads to atheism. And besides, there are heaps of religious people in these countries, you know. So it's not. I suppose the question is, how do you determine if a country is atheist or not? Yeah, and like for example, Japan. Japan is Japan is well, actually that is it's secular. Well, to a point, it's secular, but then there are religious people as well. It's a hard, you know, it's a silly. But I would say probably okay. I don't know what I would say here because like again, I don't know how you call a country atheist. Like maybe the land is atheist. And you look at Britain and the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth has a state church, the Anglican Church. You know, King Charles has his church, literally has his church. And so is Australia a secular, well, yeah, an atheist country? Well, no, because we have our own church. So therefore, New Zealand as well has a state-run church. It's yeah. Bad argument on both sides, but more so on Redeem Zoomer's side.
But why are these particular countries so prosperous in the first place? They may be secular now, but they're rooted in generations and generations of Protestant Christianity.
Correlation doesn't equal causation. You idiot.
If you want an example of a country that's atheist and not rooted in Christianity, look at communist China,
which has the highest GDP in the world.
There's 4,000 gods that people believe in, and you're atheist to 3,999 of them. I just go one god further. Okay, this isn't the gotcha that you think it is.
Actually, it is a gotcha. It is. Trust me, it is.
Because the question of whether some sort of God exists is fundamentally different from the question of which religion is right about God.
No, that's not why we say, you know, you're atheist 3,000, almost 4,000 gods, don't go one god further. We use the one God further argument because Christians will present their claims as the absolute truth and come up with the really weird arguments against all of the other religions without realizing that those other religions have arguments against Christianity. We give the 3,999 God argument because atheists equally reject all all religious / supernatural claims because we don't see any evidence for any of them. Whereas when the Christian goes, my religion is right because of, just because it is. Well, there are believers in these other gods who go, it's right just because it is. So it's more about the standard of argument as opposed to which god is real. And I'll say none of them. But again, this is a dodge. Redeem Zoomer has dodged the question because that's what apologists do. They dodge the question because, there's very little honesty in apologists and apologetics. And yeah.
If God created everything, then who created God? Well, God is defined as the uncaused causer.
Where does it say that? That is something that you have said, but do you have proof of that aside from a book?
Everyone knows there needs to be a first cause at the beginning of the chain of all events in the universe, and it makes a lot more sense for that first cause to be a personal God who does this for a reason.
Oh, really? It makes more sense for God. This is why I say God is the bucket that you reach to when you don't have an answer. And I don't know, it's like, why can't there be something that created God? Why can't there be a super God? Why can't super God have created God to take the bins out every Thursday night? Maybe it's why God was created, to take the bins out, and then God got bored and made a simulator or something. Speaking of simulators, like why can't us being in a matrix simulation be just as rational as God? Have you thought about that? But yeah, God is the uncaused causer. So that is such a special pleading, is what we call that. Special pleading. And that's logical fallacies is the domain of religious apologists.
Rather than some random impersonal force.
No, why not? Like, avalanches are random impersonal forces. Viruses are random impersonal forces. Car crashes are random impersonal forces. Well, I hope they're impersonal. Life is full of random impersonal forces. Like, why does a personal force get to create a world full of impersonal force? It's like, it's weird, but yeah. Why can't everything be the result of random impersonal forces? Like you look at the universe around us, it's full of random impersonal forces. Anyway.
Science disproves God. Well, actually, the church invented modern science. All the founders of the scientific revolution deeply believed in God.
Okay, I'm going to pause him here. This is, again, a dodge. So he's correct in that a lot of the founding fathers of modern science were deeply Christian, but they weren't the church. This is again, it's a masterclass in bad apologetics. Yeah, it wasn't like the Catholic Church set up an organization to, it was these, actually, it's funny, like in Galileo, it was the church who was persecuting people who were, the church was persecuting people who were coming to unapproved conclusions.
God. In medieval theologians laid the groundwork for modern science by saying the world was governed by an intelligent creator. That means we can understand the world with our intelligence. And studying God led to studying the world because the world is God's creation.
Correlation doesn't equal causation, right? Of course, except when I want it to. Yes, I'll agree that the world is governed by. No, they're not governed by laws. This is the thing: the world is not governed by laws. The laws of nature are like descriptions of what should happen in a given scenario. Force equals mass times acceleration. Every action has an equal opposite reaction. Thermodynamics. These aren't laws. It's not like God wrote, okay, for every action there shall be an equal and opposite reaction, and death is a punishment if it's not. So these are inherent properties in the universe that are regular to the point that we can trust them, but they're not like dictated by a parliament or anything. So they're not. I would agree that science. I wouldn't say science disproves God. Science disproves a creator God. A deity could still exist that had nothing to do with the world. We know nothing about that deity, but it still could exist. But But I would agree, science has disproved God, and this is what I said at the beginning, is that we as Western Christians tend to look at the science to come up with our understanding, and we find that nothing in our universe is caused by God or God's enemies.
God is just used to fill in the gaps of things that science can't explain yet.
Correct.
Well, actually, God is the reason for everything, even things that science can explain. It's not one or the other. It's not like everything's explained by either science or God, and the more science can explain, the less God can explain. Really, science can explain almost everything, but God is still behind it all, because science explains the how, and God explains the why.
Well, this is incorrect. If you look at the intelligent design arguments, God is both the how and the why. And the intelligent design movement is based on contrived dualism. If you actually read the Kitzmiller versus Dover judgment, contrived dualism is what you may know as a black and white fallacy. But yeah, God is a reason for everything. Okay. Miscarriages, God. Cancer, God. Earthquakes, God. Climate change, God. Even if God is the why, it's a very lousy why. And this guy would not get far in a proper philosophy class. Probably Frank Turek's philosophy class or Lee Strobel's philosophy class, but not an actual proper one.
If God is good, why can't he destroy all evil? Well, he eventually will.
Says who? Has God actually said that? I don't see any proof that he has.
Why can't he do it now? Because he'd have to destroy you.
So God's master plan to bring humanity to a place of everlasting peace is scuppered by the existence of one person. Like, let God destroy me then. If God, it's just interesting that, there's nothing stopping God from destroying that singular person who, is the embodiment of all evil. I don't quite, and that's also weird in that God can't destroy evil without destroying the person. It's like God can do anything, right? It turns out he can't.
Why does God let any bad things happen? Because we deserve it.
Sounds like he's trying to justify being in an abusive relationship. Because let's put this into a marriage context. Why do bad things happen? Because you deserve it. If the husband said that to his wife, or wife said that to a husband, it's an abusive relationship. But apparently, when it's religious, but if the other person in the relationship doesn't exist, it's a religious belief. I don't get it.
Well, animals don't sin, so why do they suffer? Well, the Bible says all things will be restored, so if God is good, we can assume that they will be compensated.
So notice how he didn't actually answer the question. He was like, why do they suffer? Well, because God wants it that way. Essentially, God wants it that way. And even his reading of Ephesians 1:10, what is Ephesians 1:10? I had it before. Hold on, let me just see if I can find the it doesn't actually Ephesians 1:10 doesn't actually really say much. Where was it? And he has made known to us the mystery of his will according to his good pleasure, which he purposed in Christ as a plan for the fullness of time, to bring all things in heaven and on earth together in Christ. So it's just esoteric mumblings. It's not actually Ephesians 1:10 is not about animals being restored, because of the suffering. It's just esoteric mumblings. And this whole thing that we suffer, like, okay, yes, we're suffering now, but we'll be compensated. That does nothing to alleviate suffering in the here and now. And this is why, it's a stupid argument, because one, it doesn't answer the question, and two, it doesn't, how can I say, it makes Christians look really bad to say, yeah, look, it'll be all right. It's like, well, that doesn't help me. I'm going through something. How does that help me? When you die, fuck you.
How do you know that God isn't evil instead?
Oh, this one.
Well, because evil is not a thing the way good is. Just like cold is just a lack of heat, and dark is just a lack of light, evil is just a lack of good. And for good to be objective, it needs to come from God. So a God who is objectively evil is logically impossible.
Wow, Frank Turek would be proud. So Frank Turek's either taking notes or just sort of wiping tears. He's like, this is so good. Evil is not necessarily lack of good. It's, to me, evil is the choice to do harm when you had other options to not cause harm. That to me is evil. And like good in accordance with God's nature. Well, then killing tons of people is good because, it's in accordance with God's nature. So yeah, it's just, it's a bit of a, yeah. And like, again, it doesn't answer, like, how can you say, let's revise the question. How do you know Hitler is an evil? Well, Hitler, evil isn't a substance, and evil is a lack of good, and good is in accordance with Hitler's nature. That's just, that says nothing about human suffering or human well-being. It just says what God, it references God, and even inconsistently on that aspect, I would argue. Yeah, it's like, how do you know God is an evil? Well, because I've assumed God is good, therefore God isn't evil. It's a really fucking bad argument.
Can God make a rock he can't lift? Well, you're just asking if God can contradict himself, like can God lie, or can God change, or can God make another God? And the answer to all those things is no. God being all-powerful means he can do anything to things outside himself. It doesn't mean that
except destroy evil.
He can do anything to himself or that he can contradict himself.
Okay, so let's go back. Like, I never use this "can God make a rock he can't lift," except in a philosophy sense, not as God doesn't exist kind of sense. Can God lie? Yes, God lies numerous times. Jeremiah 27, Jeremiah 4:10, 1 Kings 20:23, Ezekiel 14:9 are all verses that say God lies. Can God change? God definitely can and has. First, the idea of God having a son is not Pentateuch theology. There is no son in the Pentateuch. It's the only time God gets a son is in the New Testament. And can God make another God? Well, yes, I don't see why not. There'll be two things that don't exist, but God can make another God. I don't see why not. I don't see why this guy's. Oh, I know why this guy's butthurt, because he's a fundamentalist Christian.
Himself. It doesn't mean that he can do anything to himself or that he can contradict himself.
So God can't go fuck himself. That'd be an interesting scenario, but okay.
Why did God let evil exist at all? So he could be glorified in defeating it. Triumph over evil is a greater good than evil having just never existed.
Not necessarily. Sorry. Why did God let evil exist at all? Like, being glorified and defeating it, that's like saying I created a bank and I created the bank robber, and then I'm going to be the hero when I stop the bank robber. That's just fucked up. That is seriously messed up theology. That is, yeah. Oh, sorry, he's a fundamentalist. Yes, sorry, I should have guessed. He's got his head so far up his theological backside that, yeah, of course this argument makes sense to him.
Religion is just wishful thinking. Well, if that were true, then the Bible wouldn't be all about how much we all suck.
Well, the thing is that numerous religions tell us how bad we are, and we have problems that need fixing. Scientology, Islam, Buddhism. You look at Buddhism. Buddhism is all about denying yourself. So just because it's, and yes, the Bible may be about how much we suck, but that doesn't stop religion from being wishful thinking in itself.
Psychology explains why you believe in God. So what? If God is real, we should expect there to be some psychological or social benefit to believing in him.
Again, so yeah, correlation doesn't equal causation. But that doesn't say that. How can I say? Like, just because there's benefits to religious belief doesn't mean that religious belief is real. And look, I've never met a sad UFOologist. I've never met a sad Buddhist. I've never met a sad Scientologist. Does that mean that those things are real because there is a benefit to it? Yeah, like the person, I think Sam Harris has this excellent thing about someone whose life is changed by the fact that they realize that they're destined to marry Angelina Jolie. Yes, it's a very, very good point by Sam Harris. Yeah, like just because there is a psychological and social benefit doesn't mean that the thing is real. And like I've always argued along that religion, one of the things about religion is that it brings societies together. It's like a glue. It's like a glue that holds people together because there's like a common belief and common culture.
Social benefit to believing in him. Spiritual experiences can be explained by brain chemicals.
Mm-hmm.
Well, romantic experiences can also be explained by brain chemicals, but that doesn't mean your life isn't real. So spiritual experiences being explained by brain chemicals doesn't mean that God isn't real.
But your inference here is that spiritual experiences are real because of God. Brains do really weird things. For example, every night when you dream, your brain, you're both the star and the director, and the audience of a movie that plays every night in your brain. People who believe that Hitler is talking to them through the static in the radio, is that because of brain chemicals, or is that because of a real, because it's really happening? Man, this guy would fail. Not only would he fail a psychology class, he would also fail a sociology class and a neurology class, unless those classes were given by J. Warner Wallace.
Well, drug trips show that spiritual experiences are from the brain. Well, people who have had both drug trips and near-death experiences say that they're completely different categories of feeling.
Wow, people who have been assaulted and people who have survived terrorist attacks, they say they're two different things. Therefore, guy's a clown. Like just because they're different doesn't mean they're not based on neurological experience. It's yeah. The guy is not just a clown, he's an apologist.
The story of Jesus was copied from the story of Horus or some other ancient character. Okay, dude, that's a Reddit atheist level myth. Even atheist scholars know that that's silly.
Yes, he's got a point. Though I'll say that his strawman atheist has a better point. It wasn't so much that Jesus was copied; it's more that Jesus became the figurehead for a Jewish syncretization of Judaism and the Greco-Roman house cults. If you look at the Greco-Roman mystery faiths, they're all about mostly demigod figures or divine beings that came to earth, death and resurrection, or all this kind of stuff. So to me, out of all of the deity figures who've had their birth prophesied, who have been betrayed by followers, who were born of a virgin, who died and resurrected and underwent post-mortem apotheosis, Jesus would be the only one in history. So I wouldn't say Jesus is a copy from Horus. There's, I also say Isis, Romulus, Mithra. Well, yeah, there are lots of parallels between Jesus and the other rising and dying deities. Because it's a Reddit atheist argument. Yeah, and like your apologetics are any better,
Reddit atheist level myth. Even atheist scholars know that that's silly. Faith is the opposite of logic and reason. No, it's not. Faith just means trust. Anytime you eat food, you're having faith that it's not poisoned, even if you can't scientifically prove it. If you're married, you have faith that your wife loves you, even if you can't scientifically prove that. And if you tried to scientifically prove it, she'd probably get very mad at you because it would mean you didn't trust her.
Hey, did someone order a steaming, hot, fresh equivocation fallacy? Because that's what this guy just did. Equivocation fallacy. Equivocation fallacy. Equivocation fallacy. In logic, equivocation, let me share this tab, is an informed fallacy resulting from the use of a particular word/expression in multiple senses within an argument. Well, any of you got, let's look at some examples. Here's an example. Premise 1, annoying co-workers are a headache. Premise 2, painkillers can help you get rid of a headache. Conclusion, painkillers can help you get rid of annoying workers. That's cute, but yeah. But yes, faith is, okay, let me see if I can find. Okay. Faith. I'll go Merriam-Webster because it's probably the most digestible. Faith, allegiance to duty or a person. See loyalty. Fidelity to one's promises. Sincerity of intentions. Number 2, belief in the traditional doctrines of religion. Firm belief in something for which there is no proof. Yeah, that's something that is believed, especially with strong conviction. Yeah, I could also say that faith is trust in reliable experience. Let me just so I don't want to take up too long here. I'll see what, because actually Google had like a really good definition. Okay, here we go. So 1 is complete trust and confidence or someone or something. Or 2, strong belief in the doctrines of religion based on spiritual conviction rather than proof. I think the definition I use is assent of the mind to an unprovable proposition. That is, so yes, this is an equivocation fallacy through and through. But what would I expect? You know, it's Masterclass in bad apologetics.
Evolution proves God didn't create the world. Well, not necessarily. God often works through natural processes in the Bible, and for all of church history, there have been prominent Christian theologians who have had a more metaphorical interpretation of Genesis, even well over 1,000 years before Darwin existed.
Okay, so evolution is not about God making the world. So he's strawmanning his strawman atheist for a start. Yeah, God didn't. Yeah, evolution is about the biological diversity of life on Earth. That's what. And look, you can say God works through natural processes, but then and look, you can quote St. Augustine as, you know, saying Genesis metaphorical, but then you have AIG and CMI and ICR who all say that, you know, Genesis is literal. You know, it's interesting how like fundamentalists would go, you know, Genesis 1:1 says God made the heavens and the earth, and there's nothing you can say about that. That is it. That's all there is to say about that. But then when you ask him about talking snakes, that's metaphorical. That's yeah, you know, that's yeah. Satan possessed the snake. Yeah, that's it wasn't really a talking snake. It was just a snake that looked like it talked. You know, yeah, come on. Yeah, so guys, and because you guys can't agree on Genesis, I can discard all your opinions. Hey, you said it yourself, Redeem Zoomer. But yeah, so evolution is not about God.
Even well over 1,000 years before Darwin existed. Christianity only spread because of military conquest. Well, eventually they did.
Well, actually, so just here, I'm going to pick up a point here. His strawman atheist says Christianity spread by military conquest. Redeem Zoomer himself has him quoted saying Christianity spread only by military conquest. So the first statement, Christianity spread by military, is true. Christianity did spread by military conquest. Not every time, but, you know, it's regular enough that, well, it's just regular, but, you know, there were times in which Christianity was spread by military conquest. There's nothing controversial. But then when he asked Christianity spread only by military conquest, that is completely incorrect.
Because of military conquest. Well, eventually they did do military conquest, but for the first 300 years of Christianity, it was illegal, and it took over the Roman
No.
Empire despite that because of how popular it became.
No, that is wholly incorrect. Christianity was not illegal for 300 years. It may have been illegal in some provinces at some times, but not wholesale throughout since its inception. Rome was fairly relaxed about how about your religious belief, just as long as it didn't look like you were planning to overthrow the emperor. That was the thing. There was a religion in Rome, the cult of Attis and Cybele, and I mentioned this numerous times in my podcast, where they had a festival every year where men would run down the street dressed in women's clothing, and there's and part of the festival included cutting off your penis. Now, it's not like sure, and that religion was actually looked down upon by the people of the day. Yeah, but that wasn't illegal. What was illegal was gathering with the suspicion that you were plotting to overthrow the emperor. And that's why Pliny the Younger writes to, I think, forget which emperor it was. I don't think it was Tiberius, but, one of the emperors going, look, what are these guys, I'm not sure what these guys believe or how to handle them. So if Christianity was so illegal, Pliny the Younger, who was like the most qualified legal person in the land, he should have known how illegal Christianity was. But it's not that. And then Christianity didn't spread because of how popular it was. Christianity spread because it was the official state religion. So again, this guy is promoting lie after lie after lie after lie. It's, I'm sorry if it comes across as harsh, but you've got to call out for what it is. It is just, it's just falsehood after falsehood after falsehood. I don't know if it's bad research or just, uncritically accepting apologist arguments. It's horrible.
Constantine invented what we now know of as Christianity. Again, Reddit atheist level myth. Atheists can do better than that. Listen to an actual scholar.
He's not entirely wrong, though. I wouldn't say Constantine invented modern Christianity. Constantine founded what eventually became modern Christianity. So modern Christianity, I would say, came out of the four great awakenings from the 1600s to the 1900s, which themselves were born out of the Protestant movement, which was born out of Martin Luther's, thing against the Catholic Church, died of worms. But that was because the Catholic Church at the time was running roughshod over everything. And notice how it's called the Roman Catholic Church, because, it started in Rome because, Roman, Constantine kind of stuff, so Constantine created the religion which eventually became modern Christianity. So I wouldn't say Constantine invented modern Christianity, but he certainly had a hand in it. And then there was lots of other people along the way, but yeah. But it's a Reddit myth. Like, dude, like some of the dumb shit you've, presented here today, it's a Turek myth.
If Christianity is true, why are there so many denominations of it? Well, yeah, there are a lot of denominations, but things they agree on are a lot more significant than the things they disagree on. There's no evidence for Jesus out.
Okay, sorry, just got distracted by something. Just because Christian denominations agree on the essentials doesn't answer the question of why there are so many. Doesn't answer why there are so many Christian denominations, or why they have, at various stages of history, gone to war with each other. It's persecuted each other. I don't quite. That's, and again, just because they. Just because. So I'm just trying to, a little family drama on the WhatsApp. So just because, numerous denominations agree on the one thing, like doesn't mean they're right. Like for example, Islam has a handful of denominations. Doesn't mean they're right. So yeah, it's just, again, it's a bad argument. It's just bad apologetics all around.
Agree on are a lot more significant than the things they disagree on. There's no evidence for Jesus outside the Bible.
Well, here we go.
Well, that's not true. There's the ancient Jewish historian Josephus who wrote about Jesus, and he's one of the reasons why even secular scholars know Jesus historically existed.
Okay, so not only is this guy failing a philosophy class, a sociology class, a neurology class, he's now going to fail a history class unless those classes are done by Gary Habermas. Oh boy, bad apology. No, Ravi Zacharias. If this is Ravi Zacharias's RZIM, teaching, that's okay. The reason he's failing history is one, what he said about Christianity being illegal for 300 years, but now Josephus. On the screen here is the Testimonium Flavianum. It is found in Antiquities of the Jews, Book 18, Chapter 3. However, almost every scholar concludes that the Testimonium Flavianum is at least a partial forgery, if not an outright forgery. To me, it is an outright forgery for two reasons. One, the placement of the text, because the last sentence is, "So named from him are not extinct to this day." The very next sentence says, "And about this time another sad calamity befell the Jews." Well, hold on. We've just had an advertisement for the most revolutionary person in history, and now you're saying another sad calamity befell the Jews? It's like, hold on, it's what's going on here? So, that says to me, there's something going on here. But second is that Josephus actually believed that Vespasian was the person that the biblical prophecies were pointing to, not Jesus. Number three is that there's actually a case that the Testimony Flavianum is actually like a point for point reworking of Luke, and there's actually some scholarly writings about that. So yeah, and number four, why I don't accept Josephus as proof of Jesus, is that the other two things that Josephus wrote that could point to Jesus. So one, there's a mention of John, which, okay, there could well have been a guy called John the Baptist. That's not proof of Jesus. And second, there's a inscription in a sentence called Jesus, him called Christ, when it's referring to James. So there's a story about James being executed by being thrown off the temple pinnacle. And he's actually referred to as James, the brother of Jesus, him called Christ. And that is actually not an argument, because the whole context of that passage is that, this is my scratchy memory, but there was a priest who was removed. I forget who removed the priest, and then the Jews actually, Jesus Ben Damnius, I think it was. The priest was like forcibly removed, and someone was, I think, like Jesus, Peter, the brother of Jesus, Ben Damnius, was killed, and then so the Jews appealed to Caesar, and it's just interesting that, like, the idea that a Christian being killed causes the Jews to go to Caesar to have their argument rectified seems quite odd. Whereas if this isn't about Jesus, it makes a bit more sense. But yeah, that's just my scratchy memory. I think I did an episode on it. Some time back. But yeah, if anyone says that Josephus is excellent evidence for Jesus, know that they have failed history class.
You really think God made billions of galaxies with billions of stars in each of them just to have a personal relationship with you? Yes.
And this guy shows he's in a cult. That is, this is very, very culty thinking. It's, yeah. Anyway, there is a podcast episode on the Talk in the Atheist podcast where I actually make a slightly more coherent, a bit more bit more straightforward answers. But yeah, look, if you enjoyed this, subscribe, hit the notification bell, because I rarely do things like this. So enjoy it while it lasts, and look after yourselves, stay safe. Yeah, just be cool people, and yeah, don't be douchebags. Don't be lying apologetic. 1, don't be douchebags. 2, don't be lying douchebags. 3, don't be lying apologetic douchebags. Adios.